Triangulation, conquering by dividing. From video seminar. Triangulation is used to manipulate, harm, coerce, dominate, and or control involving a third person into a relationship in order to violate a boundary, hurt, control, protect, or punish another person. Play everyone against each other or target one person in a group. Gain, maintain power through secretive relationships. Facilitate distrust, dislike for the target. Distribute propaganda about the target. Share negative information that one person said about the other. Lie, exaggerate, and or distort reality. If caught, turn it back onto the target. Convince each person to keep secrets, to not confront the other. Selfloverecovery.com. Pages, narcissism. Dear precious Michael, I'm certain there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Well, there is. There's plenty wrong. You feel the way you do because you have been hurt by gaslighting and triangulation maneuvers for too long. Well, that's true. Your children have been affected by this too. Yeah. In a way, they cannot be blamed for the way they treat you. They have been gaslighted too and have suffered significant harm. Those types of dynamics have a profound effect on children as they grow up because that is all that they have known in their short lives. Please do not blame yourself for it. It is not your fault. Your situation is due to unfortunate psychodynamics that prevailed in your relationship for many years. You are not responsible for someone else's decision. You are responsible for educating yourself on the matter and learning as much as you can about it and how best to handle it now. Do not waste any time in thinking about what you could have done in the past. The past cannot be changed. It is gone. Start now with learning and knowing what the Lord expects of us, which is sound doctrine. The Lord has given us a brain. He expects us to use it, and I know you are very good at that, and you will succeed. Thank you, dear saint. Because you want to know and understand everything, not just about a spiritual level, but also from an intellectual and logical point of view, and that is exactly what is needed to avoid deception. The mind, the intellect, our understanding is so important when it comes to spiritual matters. Mark 12:30, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. Luke 10:27, and he answering said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. How can we love our neighbor if we do not love except ourselves? Remember who we are in Christ, a new creation, acceptable in the sight of God by the blood of the Lamb. And there's a lot wrong with me. There's a lot wrong with all of us. I am definitely to blame, and I take full responsibility for everything that has happened. I have a dark past. My dark past is that I was once very, very broken, very in love with what I was doing, businesses, making money, trying to build a life, and everything was about self-aggrandizement. And I soon started to realize that none of those things were working. And to a large extent, I'm so happy that none of those things were successful, right? Because had they been, who knows where I would have landed. Luke 12:28-30. If then God so clothe the grass, which is today in the field, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith? And seek not ye what ye shall eat, for what ye shall drink, neither ye be of doubtful mind. For all these things do the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. Romans 8:5-6. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Romans 8:27. And ye that searcheth the hearts knoweth what is the mind of the Spirit, because he maketh intercession for the saints according to the will of God. Romans 12:2, and be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. It's very powerful, because it is very much about getting into alignment with God's will. Never pray for anything except whatever God's will is, because God knows best, and he does want to give us the very best things. And we don't understand what the best things are until we've allowed him to manifest that, to bring that about. I don't want to use the word manifest, but allow him to do the things that are truly very important to us. Allow him to do the things that are important to us because they're important to God, right? But we won't know that until we've allowed God a free rein, a free hand. Last night I had a dream. I woke up at about 3-4 in the morning, 3:30, somewhere around there. And you can hear that I'm a bit tired, because I haven't really slept at all properly for a long time. I used to be the person that used to sleep well. Like, I never had a problem sleeping. I would get into bed and I would just sleep, and there would be no... But these days it's been a bit more challenging, and I understand there's a lot of stresses out there. But my sleep state hasn't been perfect, and in a way, it's also because God is talking to me, right? I've gone through a lot of pain, and I've had to deal with it. And we've all gone through pain, so this is about everybody and how they kind of deal with it. And sometimes waking up in the middle of the night and just listening to what God has to say, and he sort of reveals to me things. Like last night, he revealed something very interesting to me. He revealed to me what he said to me. He basically said, and not in words, but in feelings. I can't explain it, I get lots of ways in which God communicates with me. He'll communicate with me through feelings, through messages that are, like I'll watch something or read something, and then there'll be this message on top of it, right? In the form of like a statement or something. Sometimes dreams, but mostly daytime visions. Like I get daytime visions every single day without fail. I mean, I can't remember a day that I have not had a vision. So I definitely see daytime visions all the time about things. I've almost like prophetic day-to-day visions, but I don't profess my prophetic abilities. Like I don't put it out there. I really, like I'll get a prophetic vision, but it'll be like to myself. I'll keep it. And I've learned that I have to kind of give that person the vision that I had. And last night, in this dream state, something unusual happened. Like God was saying to me, if you were God, if you could, like you could do anything to that person, right? What would you do? How would you fix the situation? Almost as if God was saying to me, I can fix this. I can fix this incredibly easy, but I want you to go through the exercise of learning what it is to be God, right? I'll never, you know what I'm saying, right? I'm not, God was really saying, for a bit, just for an experiment, you be God, and how would you change that person that you so badly want to come back into your life, or that you would like to somehow have that person apologize or ask for forgiveness or whatever, right? Like, what would you do? And I'm not saying I want this person badly in my life again. I'm just saying that it's almost like God is saying, what would you do if you were in my position? And he let me have free reign over this me, right? It was me as an example. And then free reign over her. And I had the ability to control her thoughts and and everything. And I had 3 scenarios that I played out, right? And these 3 scenarios, scenario number 1 was that I saw her kind of moving away from me. And then I would gently hold her and have her come back to me, right? Have her come back to me and sit with me and talk to me and actually apologize and, fantastically, right? A fantastical belief, a fantasy. And then my second one was that she would somehow have something happen in her life that would show her that she was being silly and that she had lost out on this very special person in her life, which she will probably never do. But I don't want to use words that prophetically bring that about. And then there was a third scenario where it was like it was almost like where she just suddenly figured out, whoa, what have I lost? Let me go back to this man. And I realized almost how unrealistic all of them were, because it was almost like I was manipulating her free will. And it was definitely feeling awkward and wrong, like I didn't want to do that. I actually did not want to do that. I started to realize that God was saying to me, can you see, I don't want to manipulate her free will. I could do it. God can do anything. But what is the best way, Michael? What would you have me do rather? What would be more in keeping with who I am as a fair and loving God? And for me, the answer became very simple. It was like, what if I could, by virtue of just loving somebody, just loving them, just love them, no matter what injustices they were doing to me, just love them. And they would come to see that my goodness had not changed, even though they had done an injustice. And that kind of made sense to me. But it was more of a natural, don't control. It's almost like I had my hand on her, like I was able to change her will. I could do it. But when I did it, it felt uncomfortable. But when I let it go, and I just let her go through her path of learning, it was better, but it was more precarious for me because it meant the possibility of actually losing that person completely. And then it made me realize that, years from now, if we have years, I don't think we have years here, but that's another story. Years from now, she'll look back on this and go, I'll look back on it and go, why was I even perturbing myself with this person when God had a better plan for me, which was so much better, but I needed to rejoice and thank God rather for moving forward and moving into a direction of where things needed to go rather than try to hold back to the past. By the way, what you're hearing in my voice is tiredness. I'm just exhausted. Things have been really rough on so many levels. And I think mostly it's been emotional. It's been this frustration of not being able to do what I want to do daily, fast enough, efficiently enough. Time poor. I want to have more time. I go to bed. I'm getting to bed earlier, but I used to be going to bed late, and I used to be getting up early. So I was burning the candle on both ends, and that wasn't good. Interdependent. You feel at ease with who you are. You can adapt and change to improve your life and your relationships. You can stand strong, advocate for yourself, and be true to yourself, to your values. You're able to set limits even when others may be disappointed by you. You have learned to say no. You rarely go along with something you can't or don't want to do. When you say yes, you mean it. There was a statement that was made by Dr. Malone where he said something very interesting just now. He said, You see. What did he say? He said something really interesting. I think it's this one. No, it's not. But he said something really interesting. Where there is risk, there must be choice. I thought that was good. Which relates to this, yeah. You rarely go along with something you can't or don't want to do. Where there is risk, there must be choice. And there is risk. There is risk. Risk is alive and very prevalent in this world. You can take in feedback from others, even if it's negative. This morning I had a situation happen where I acted wrongly. And I'm so happy I did, because it taught me a lesson, which was to be more empathetic for the person, the kind of people that are right now advocating this negativity. I started to realize one of two things. Number one was that the enemy, the choice was open for what's going on in the world right now, for people to decide whether they want to or not, right? Whether they want to stay on in the world and go through further judgment, go through further refinement, or whether they wanted to be raptured and taken out of here. And I started to realize that I'm just thankful that God woke me up, that I have chosen not to fall for the lies, whereas some people have fallen for the lies, and they are under judgment, and they are to be further refined. And that's sad, and that in and of itself is reason to feel and empathize with these people, to really feel for them, because what they have done is they have placed upon themselves, by virtue of their desire to believe the lie, they've placed upon themselves a very deep punishment, which is really sad. And we pray for each and every single one of them, keep the spectrum in mind and get curious about where you fall on it at different moments in your relationship. Practice behaviors that foster interdependence. I like that, because for quite a while now, I've been learning to be more subtle, even though I mustn't be, at a time when we need truth and we need it spoken loudly and immediately. I've learned to, for the sake of reaching larger audiences, I need to be more subtle, and I need to be able to win more. Let me make this one clear, because it's not coming across very clearly, because whatever I'm about to say next is going to sound wrong when I actually know exactly what I'm trying to say. So what I'm getting at is, so far I've been speaking to audiences of small numbers, right? I mean, I've spoken to large audiences, 3, 4, 5,000 people. But recently, especially in the last year and 10 months, my audience sizes have been maybe under 1,000. And I'm in online across 11 channels. I have by God's glory, by Jesus' glory, I have a greater number of people that I can speak with. But I'm talking about the physical in an auditorium situation. I've been speaking to under 1,000 people. And it's because I am not subtle that I don't get re-invited back. Because I just say it, I'm very, I'm kind of at the point where I just about expect the microphone to get cut. Like I'm speaking, and within a minute or two or 4 or 3 or whatever, that microphone gets cut. And I've started to realize I need to be more subtle, like much more subtle. Otherwise, I'm not going to get my message more clearly communicated. But I always have this belief that I might never get in front of that audience again. That audience is there. I've got them. They're ready to listen to a message, whatever that message is. I know I've got a few minutes to say what I need to say. I say it, and they heard it, and they'll go home and think about it. But always knowing that I may never have that audience again. I was at an event last year, which was a government, an Asian government delegation that was in Australia. And, I was invited, and I was in, bow tie. I was, it was really kind of cool, and at one stage in the evening, one of my friends was up on stage singing. And, because she had commandeered the stage, one of my other friends gave me the mic because she was on stage. She gave me the mic. She gave it to him. He gave it to me because it was kind of like, she didn't give it to me directly. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been allowed back on the stage to sing. But it kind of came through her to him, who's like one of my friends, close friend. And then I went on stage and I spoke. And within about 4 minutes, I could hear the audio being lowered. They were purposefully, lowering the mixing channel, because obviously what I was saying was a bit intense, especially because the audience in that room were only about 12% Christian. The rest were, because they're Asian, were from other religious beliefs. Not that Christianity is a religion, but that's another story. It's the only one that isn't a religion. But again, that's a long story in itself. That's a show. I've done shows on that, and you probably already know which shows I'm talking about. But I kind of saw that I could have done more had I been more subtle. One of my friends actually gave me an idea. He said, your lady friend was able to sing on stage for much longer periods of time than you. And I thought, yeah, that's so true. And I thought, well, next time I'll sing my message, right? And for those of you who don't know, and you, Saint, this is who I'm talking to directly, I have sung. I have, in fact, at one stage, I was recording albums and doing all kinds of fun stuff. This was my former life, my very, my other life, where I would go off and get airtime and stage time and to go and dance and sing. Actually, not much dancing, but definitely singing. And that was really fun. So I've learned to be more subtle. And I think that's what that interdependent thing there is all about, which is practice behaviors that foster interdependence. And that comes from being a little bit more subtle with the people around me, rather than splurge a truth and then not get invited back. Rather create intrigue, be wise as serpents and meek as doves. We need to be more smart in our approach. Otherwise, we're offensive, and we don't mean to be. But we know our time is short here, just like the enemy's time is short. We know that we have a certain number of people to reach, and how do we get to them? Counterdependent. You avoid closeness and intimacy except on your own terms. Your boundaries tend to be rigid. You may view life, values, and people in absolute terms, good, bad, right, wrong. You have a low tolerance level for others' feelings and needs. You may view needing others as a sign of weakness, which I do. A fragile sense of self makes it hard to tolerate losing or rejection. Hey, yeah, me too. You're haunted by a sense of chronic emptiness resulting from your disconnection from loving, meaningful relationships. Wow. 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 Wow, this is amazing. I'd probably say I went from being interdependent to being more counterdependent. Codependent. You adapt to others and lose yourself, or over rely on others for a sense of purpose. Yeah. You spend a lot of time imagining what others feel and think and how they will react. Setting boundaries triggers anxiety. Sometimes you're not sure what your needs are or if you have any. If you do know your needs, you don't feel entitled to them. Wow, I'm feeling this as well. That's the thing about psychology. Every time I studied psychology, I always would go, I think I've got that problem. Oh, I've got that problem too. And I remember reading Ruch, R-U-C-H, and there was this huge textbook filled with mental disorders. And I would go through them. And every page I would like, hold on a minute. Why do I feel like I have almost every single one of these disorders, you know? And when I started speaking to other people, they all felt the same way. Everyone seems to have mild symptoms of these disorders, you know. I'm seeing some codependent issues here. If you do know your needs, you don't feel entitled to them. That's so true. You find it hard to communicate directly. You find indirect ways of getting needs met. Yeah, to a degree. You're tuned into others' emotions and feel overwhelmed when there's conflict. You're tuned into others' emotions and you feel overwhelmed when there's conflict. Yeah. I don't understand that one a lot, to be honest with you, but you dread being judged by others. Something that's never really bugged me is being judged by others. Like, who cares? I kind of have this strange feeling inside of myself, and I think I grew up with this from a lot of the books that I read on business, where a lot of people just steamrolled ahead and just did what they did. Although I learned to be gentle on the fragile nature of people. You know, I learned to steamroll in a nice way. Like, you know, be nice, but keep going forward. Don't worry about whether they like it or not, just keep doing it. And, but I was always I always used to have this comment, this saying that I would use, which was, you know, what was it? It wasn't be a nice, was it? No. What was the comment? I used to make this comment a lot. It was, you know, just do it and apologize. Just do it, but apologize afterwards. Which kind of came from Richard Branson. I remember Richard Branson doing something in his early years in his book, How I Lost My Virginity. I think it was his first book. And in this book, he had this thing where he had this business thing going with his record company. And he was shipping records from London to France. And at some point, something went wrong. And he said his philosophy was one of, when things are unclear, just do it and apologize afterwards if you need to. And I took that approach for many, many years. It was like, they're not gonna accept this. They're not gonna go with this. So I'm just gonna do it. And if something goes wrong, I'll just apologize. And that worked. I got a lot done because of that approach. That approach was really good. And, you know, but there was a lot of criticism, you know, from especially people in the same industries that I was working in, because they would turn around and say, hey, that's not fair. You know, look how he's doing it. He's doing it that way. But he kind of gets away with it because the system is not set up to stop that from happening. I mean, here's a really good example. This is kind of a self-admission. I probably shouldn't say it, but, you know, back in the early 2000s, I was shooting commercials. I was shooting commercials in a massive way, one of my companies. You know, I was doing a lot of other things. You know, we had our the patents, the intellectual property side. That was working with all these law firms I was working with. And it was fantastic because there was so many great clients to work with and help. And then there was the bed and breakfasts that was doing, you know, it was really fun as well. Then there was the entertainments company, which was events and festivals. And then there was the distributions company that was distributing content, and that was good. And there was the real estate development company, which was doing subdivisions, buying and holding, not selling. And then there was, all these other things that I was doing. But there was this one thing that really was interesting, which was when we were doing commercials, the cost of putting a commercial into place was massive. Just to give an example, if we were filming in Sydney at the Lighthouse, it was going to cost seven grand to go and shoot. That was permission. And, I started to go, hold on a minute. I could make $7,000 if I didn't ask for permission. That's me. I'm always trying to figure out how to make money by not only improving what we're doing, but always trying to find ways. And this I learned from Otto. It's a friend of mine who runs a major hospital overseas. And I learned from Otto because one day, because he and I are still really good friends. 20 years later, we're still really good friends. And he said something fascinating to me because one day I went to visit him and he had this book in front of him. And it was kind of a book he was going through. And he was like making notes. He was literally writing an entry and a pricing, an entry and a pricing. And I said to him, what is that? Because I love systems. I want to know about systems. I'm always interested in systems. And he would say, what I do is I keep a note of the costs of everything. And I try to negotiate those costs down. I'm always boulder bashing all the time. I'm always dampening the costs. And I said, but how do suppliers feel about that? Do they like you always hitting at them? He goes, well, most of these suppliers, they don't really care because they're just reps. They don't own those companies. And these are major pharmaceuticals. They've got so much meat on that bone that they can't afford to come down in price all the time. And I said, that's very interesting because I'm sure a lot of the costs that I have could be negotiated. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. So I remember there was a company in Africa that we used a lot. Like I was there every week producing and editing and using their post-production facilities. And those invoices were always like high. They accounted for a massive 60% of the total costs of that project. And I would spend so much money there. And one day I said to this guy, his name is Ross. I said, Ross, I want to sit with you. This was after my meeting with Otto. I want to sit with you. And I want to discuss how to bring down these costs. And he was like, out of like 100 clients, you are one of 40 that has come in to negotiate. And I was like, wow, 40%. I didn't know this. And apparently there was like 40% of the people had already pre-negotiated all the pricing, and they always made sure the pricing never went over budget, etc. And I really liked that because what happened was I sat with Ross. He was with Cass, who ran this big production facility in Witkoppen, in Halfway House. And I'll never forget this. We sat down and I said to him, what can we do? What are these other 40 out of 100 clients of yours? What do they do? And he goes, and I think he inadvertently told me a secret. He said, well, before a project starts, they come in, we sit down, we meet. They say, this is the budget, and I don't want to go over this budget, and I'd like you to help me keep it in budget. So instead of these companies, like I was doing, coming in and sitting down and endlessly using up studio time, editing time, and post-production, sound sweetening and sound mixing and final mixing facilities, endlessly. These were hours and hours that I was using. These guys had been really smart. What they were doing is they were coming in, right? This was in the late 1990s. They were coming in, they were pre-negotiating, That they only had a budget. They had a certain budget and they could not go over that budget. And then what Ross would do is he would say, look, let's work it out. So you need like what, 2 days in the edit suite? And they'd go, yeah, I think 2 days in the edit suite. And then we want like 1 half day on the grade, you know, the Da Vinci grade. We want a half day there. In those days, it wasn't Da Vinci. It was called rank. It was a rank machine, like a telecine, rank telecine. You know, half a day in the rank telecine, and then another, say, 2 days in post-production doing sound sweetening and final mix, and, you know, 2 days. And that was it. And Ross would say, yeah, let's lock it down. We'll do that. It's an hour program. I think we could do that. Mostly interviews, talking heads, etc. It was really easy to do. And when the program went over, like if they took an extra day, Ross was aware of it. Ross had a guaranteed X amount of money. And what Ross would say, the guy would go in and he'd say, you know what, we ran over by about we're going to run over by about 4 hours tomorrow. What can we do? And Ross would say, you know what, you told me up front how much it was going to be. I'll give you an extra, say, what about 2 hours? You think you could do it in an extra 2 hours and we'll keep the costs down like to zero? We won't charge you an extra 2 hours. And they'd go, yeah, you know what? Let's do an extra 2 hours. Don't charge me for that. That's fantastic. And they were basically, these guys were getting to do more work. They were getting more hours and only paying a locked in amount, which was amazing because it meant that they had this balloon money, you know, that they didn't have to spend. Whereas I was spending it, and I learned that trick very quick, you know, like 2001, no, 1998 already, I knew that trick. And it wasn't a trick, it was just a way to pre-negotiate something, have this, you know, what looks like to be what you say here, interdependence. It was an interdependent relationship. It was so much better that way because it meant that the two of you were collectively in motion together. You were doing something together, right? And I liked that. That meant that I could get my projects done, that I would never go over budget because I had the money. I knew I had that money. I wasn't going to go over budget. And one of the things that I would say was, instead of billing me 30 days later, paying it 30 days later, I would pay it like immediately after the job was done. That saved me money. It took away the problem of accounts, because one of the problems that I had was accounts, because 30 days later, when the bill arrives, you can't remember the hours. You can't remember, was it that amount or was either it changed, the rate card changed? That was horrifying. So I learned from back then, 1998, I learned to pre-negotiate up front through interdependence. And I know this is not what interdependence is all about here. I get that. I know there's 3 styles of dependency. But this particular one showed that you can get things done when you are interdependent, more so than counterdependent and more so than codependent. You can definitely, on a much more positive scale, you can actually get things done nicely when you are interdependent, when you and people know, because you're collectively owning the situation. And what happened with Ross is that my bills went from being gigantic and uncontrollable and nightmares of business to very controllable, easy to operate costings. You know, I kind of knew, you know, if I had a $50,000 budget, I would set aside, in the past I would have set aside $30,000 for editing and post-production, and I would have 20 left, which was not a lot to pay talent and, you know, cameras and sound equipment and locations and transportation and fuel and staff salaries and things. I suddenly realized I could do this better. I could say to Ross, because he didn't have to know my full budget, I could say to him, look, my total editing budget is 10 grand. So I was saving 20 grand. And he was going, okay, 10 grand, we can work with that. What about doing X amount? And then he would put the pressure on his editors. The pressure wasn't on me to finish early and quick. The pressure was on their editors through him to get the job done fast and efficient. And I was saving so much money and my productivity became better. The onus of stress was on them, not on me. And my accounts were sorted out because I would pay straight away. I was like a good payer. And I was only using up 10 grand instead of 30. And I was making an extra 20 grand profit. And I think in terms of dependency, that's what I'm getting out of this is, we need to engage with God so that he knows what we are doing and why. We need to engage with God and explain our situation. We need to make a case for where we are, where we want to go, what we want to do. And we need to do that with everybody around us. We need to tell them very openly, this is my situation. This is how I want to go about this. What do you think? What can you add to the situation? Make your expectations known up front, and also let them know your vision for what you want to do, and also let them know your what your negatives are. Be upfront. Anyway, before long, I think it was like 2000. I was driving a 500 SL Mercedes-Benz red, beautiful car. I was driving a 300 SL Mercedes, low profile, gasoline, petrol green. I had luxury cars. Everything was working because I had this thing that I'd learned from Otto, right? And I'd also learned a lot of other strategies that also relate to this interdependence, making sure that everyone is collectively working to make something come together. It's one of the secrets of being in the kingdom as well. And partnerships, your life partner, you need to kind of say, this is where I'm going. This is my vision. And if you haven't already done so, write a vision plan, a vision board, create a vision board. This is where I would like to go. This is what I'm trying to do. Because nothing hurts somebody more than them not knowing where it's all going. And I've fallen for that problem many times. It's nice to know what your plan is for everybody. Because most people are dealing with somebody without actually having a plan. There's no plan. You got to have a plan. You got to be able to engage people with a plan of where you are going. And sometimes that plan can be written, can be spoken about, but it's valuable to bring it about. A couple of other little lessons that I also learned was a strategy for triplicate of choice, triplicate of price, which is a very clever strategy for, which I thought is an amazing strategy for engaging a client with what it is they want to do exactly. Because a lot of times we think people are on the same level as we are, but they're not. They prepare to go beyond what we have as a vision, and this is I learned from Tom Hopkins. This was a really good technique. And this isn't about sales, but it's very much about this interdependence, right? Because sometimes we say something, but we need to hear what they have for us. And I think God works from that perspective of triplicate of choice as well. Like God doesn't say to us, God doesn't just say that he has a plan. He basically gives us a choice, even in our plans. He definitely does that. God definitely doesn't just have a better plan. He's got a different plan based on how prepared you are to let him go all the way. God says, and this isn't scriptural, but I get the feeling, because I would do this, what would you like? This is my plan. This is where I would like to go. But what would you like? Like, what is your perspective on this? How big do you want to go? And God will say, I will say, well, God, I just want to go there. This is my level, is here. And God will say, no. But I can offer you that, and I can offer you a third level, an even higher third level, right? Do you want to be at that third level? It's so much better, right? I'm reminded of this pastor who travels around the world. I think he's dead now. He passed away. And a German pastor. And every time he would arrive in Nigeria, or doesn't matter where, Kinshasa, Lagos, wherever, he would bring together, 2 to 3 million people in at these crusades. Wow. And it was so amazing, because it was like, in his mind, he kind of had a size, but God would always double, triple who came, the numbers of people who came. I think that's amazing, triplicate of choice. And then the last one I want to bring about, which also relates to interdependence, is there's another amazing thing, and this I learned from my dad. My dad is the most amazing man. He's really, he's really smart about so many things. But one of the things he always says this, which I really love about him. He has got techniques for everything. My dad's really incredible. My dad always has this thing about, be good, really good at what you do. Because you'll probably find that if you are really, really good at sharpening that katana, my brother also said this, but my dad improved on it. Not that I'm not giving my brother credit, because he's a great guy, but my brother sent me a whole thing about how samurai want the perfect katana. And there's these katana makers that spend 20 years making a katana, right? They're that good. These guys are like perfectionists, and there's nothing wrong with perfectionism. You are prepared to wait for the 20-year katana sword, because they are that amazing. If there's that level of sophistication and your life depends on it, right? You want the best of the best of the best. You're not going to not. And you're in training for 20 years anyway. So by the time you get that sword, it's kind of like the reward for all that training. Along the way, you've got all these bad swords that you're using, but you've got that from the very beginning, 20 years before, you've put your order in for this katana that you're only going to get 20 years later. And my dad, right from the very start, he would always say, be so good at what you do that people come to you because you are that good, right? Focus on every high touch, every place that you touch your customer when you speak to them. Have a great conversation with them. Listen to them. Be the one that does what no one does. Action things differently. Add value. Brand everything beautifully. Show you really care. Be fast. Be efficient. Which is almost impossible daily, to sort of have that level, that high standard. But try. You have to be focused on the people that you are serving. Be so good that people will love doing things with you. And that comes down to Fishtails, if you've ever read the book Fishtails. Do stuff at a level that is such high quality that people just want to do things with you. And at one stage, the Apple Corporation under Steve Jobs was able to do that. A lot of that gloss that patina sort of washed off, but they were able to do that. And there are very few companies that have been able to get it to that level of quality that is just so high. And I'm going to end it off by saying this last thing, which is my dad's technique, which I think is one of the greatest techniques for presenting. And I love this technique. It is so good. And very few people know it. And if you've hung around for the end of this, that's probably valuable. But this is a very amazing strategy. One day I went to visit my dad. And he makes the most amazing prawns. And he said, I don't eat prawns anymore, by the way, because it's one of those things you shouldn't eat. According to Leviticus, I've learned that those are the cockroaches of the ocean. So I don't touch prawn. I'll never touch prawn again. But that only happened because I'd read that biblically. I just went, whoa, God really has a problem with us eating these creepy crawlies of the ocean. But anyway, he used to make these amazing prawns. He still does, but I don't eat them anymore. But I arrived at his house, and while he was preparing these prawn, he said to me, oh, you know what? Did you hear about this? Did you watch the commercial? This commercial that that Pepsi has just done. And I said, no, tell me about it. He goes, well, it's an amazing commercial. It's got this, it's got these astronauts that arrive on the moon, and they see this can of Pepsi. And they're like blown away. What, there's a can of Pepsi on the moon? It's not possible. Anyway, these aliens suddenly surround them, and they take them down into the catacombs of the moon. And inside this massive chamber, there's this gigantic Pepsi can, like this huge can of Pepsi. And these Martians are all, they're all sort of worshiping this can of Pepsi, and then they crack it open and they pour this fluid, and the astronauts sit there and they're drinking it, and they're in this interdependent, amazing, happy relationship with these aliens, these little green men, and and the music is like this dance music. It reminds me of that little moment at the end of Return of the Jedi where the Ewoks celebrate with Luke and Han and Leia, and it's this amazing, it's an amazing piece of music, and it's like the connection between humans and aliens is made because of this Pepsi can. And I'm like, wow, that's quite amazing. That's a really cool ad. Wow. I haven't seen that, Dad. And my dad was like, that's because it hasn't been made yet. But wouldn't you like to be able to present that to Coca-Cola? And I was like, whoa. So my dad created this presentation idea by making me think that it was no longer available because it was made into a commercial. And I actually voiced the words, wow, I wish I'd shot that ad. And my dad was like, well, it's still available. You could still go and present that to Coke because that Pepsi has never made that ad. I came up with that idea. I was like, whoa, Dad, that's incredible. Anyway, I presented it to Coca-Cola, and as you probably know, it's been made into a commercial. So this is the point I'm making, is that we are always required to co-opt, to engage with whoever it is that we're talking with, and especially with God. And I think that's part of the idea with Jacob, soon to be Israel, on his way to meeting Esau, is wrestling with God, with the word of the Lord, the angel of the Lord, the word of the Lord. He is engaging, he is wrestling with him, right? Is that God loves us wrestling with him. He loves us really thinking about him. See, one of the things that I have at the back of my mind related to this is You know, it's almost as if God has taken me on a journey throughout this whole thing. One of the questions I asked right at the very beginning was, what, God, can I do to engage you in my life? How can I interdependently engage you in my story? Like it's your story, it's history. It's your story, God. But how can I let you love me so much and care for me and know that you care for me so much that I can, whatever it is that I say, like the beloved David, right? That what I say engages you to let me do this. Whatever it is that I ask you, God, you'll do. You know, we shouldn't take the ATM approach with God. I understand that. The magic bottle genie, we can't take that approach with God. But there are things that activate God. There are things that bring about God's favor. You know, test me on this, says God, Micah 3:10. God is saying to us, you know, and I think even from a biblical perspective in terms of prophecy, right, there are thousands, 3,500 prophecies. God is saying, test me on this, you'll see I am God. All these other books don't have prophecies, you know. There's only one other book which has a fake Jesus in it that's got 12 prophecies, and even those prophecies are like really lame prophecies. So they're not really prophecies because there's no God speaking in there. But in our book, in Jesus's book, the Word, in the beginning was the Word, Word is God. John, you know, we see that it is God. He is saying to us, engage with me, you know. It's the mystery of God to hide things. It's the honor of kings to seek it out, to find them out, these gems that are in the Bible. We must engage in the Word. We must constantly be seeking. I mean, every time I read the Bible, it doesn't matter how many times, I would make a show about everything I read, because every single paragraph I read, I find something I've never seen before. No matter how many times I read it. You know, my Bible has become it's like a box of jewelry, you know. It's like filled with little things, like colors and highlighters and underlinings, and it's just like, it is always a new thing. It's always a new thing. And every time I hear a new version, a new translation of the Bible, I go, there's no way the Bible says that. And I go back to my KJV 1611 or my Matthew's Bible or my, interlinear or whatever it is. And there it is. It's like completely unexpected. So God wants us to interact. And I'm going to read this again because this is so powerful, right? Interdependent. You feel at ease with who you are. Once you have this love for Jesus Christ, you are at ease with who you are, because you know that you were made in His image. You are ordained as a high priest. You are a deputized king. You have adoption to sonship. You have blessing upon blessing. You know, we have a blessed hope to look forward to. We are God's chosen. We are the children. We are the elect. We are the called out ones. It's like countless blessings. There's not even enough time to go through all the blessings. You can adapt and change to improve your life and your relationships, right? The steps of a righteous man are ordered. You can stand strong, advocate for yourself, and be true to your values, knowing that you are in Christ, knowing that you're blood bought, knowing that you have God's eternal kingdom to look forward to. We're witnesses to what's happening here on earth right now, so we can speak about it. We have the power of prayer over others. We can cover them in prayer. You know, we can do all of the miracles that Jesus performed. We're called to do them. You're able to set limits even when others may be disappointed by you. Yeah. Because we won't do certain things. There are things that we will not do. You know, very on in my career, I had an opportunity to do something that was going to earn a lot of money. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it, because what if down the line the world finds out that we did that project, that we worked on that thing that we shouldn't have done? What if Disney turns us down because we worked on that project? Now, these days, I know that Disney has got wickedness. So you have learned to say no. And yeah, we've learned to say no to evil. We've learned to say no to the things that contend with our sovereignty, things that ask us to negate God. Now we will say no. We will continue to say no to those things. We will continue to say no to the things that limit us from worshiping our Jesus. You rarely go along with something you can't or don't want to do. And that's true, you know. I've been invited many times to go and do certain things during the day or after hours, or go to places that are just, they don't edify God. I wouldn't want to be in that place at the time of the rapture. You know what I mean? There's just no way I'm gonna say yes to that. When you say yes, you mean it. That's true. You know, I promise to do the things that I set out to do. I promise to abide by my covenants, by the things that God has appointed me to do. So yeah, I will definitely do the things that I've been asked to do, that I'm appointed to do. You can take in feedback from others, even if it's negative. Yes, I can do that. I actually proved it to myself today. There was something that happened. I know I acted wrongly. I apologized. And I showed and proved that I had learned from that mistake, and that I was adult enough to really just go past it, and just totally, I went past it. I just went, no, I'm not going to I've learned from myself. I've learned from that situation, and I'm going to course correct. I'm going to correct my behavior pattern, which I did. You can honor your own needs and also consider others' needs. Correct. Keep the spectrum in mind and get curious about where you fall on it at different moments in your relationship, especially with God. Practice behaviors that foster interdependence. So I'm definitely interdependent with God, because I will not do what God does not want me to do. And I will fight the enemies of Christ. God's enemies are my enemies. And what God chooses to do is what I choose to do, even though I don't understand it, because that is true loyalty and faithfulness. So that is it. That's the level of in-depthness that I go when I read your letters, and I'm letting you have this and posting it so that you can, watch and enjoy, but at the same time let others enjoy as well, if you so choose. So if it makes it to air, you obviously let me do that. And it's always your choice. Like, if you don't want me to put this to air, I definitely won't. But, it's my way of really saying that I really value these. I learn from them. And I also hope that others learn from them too. We have so much to be thankful for with our relationship with God. What God was showing me last night was that we can't appropriate and take away someone's free will just because we would like them to act in a certain way. Which is sad, because it means that we lose people along the way, because sometimes they just will not see it from our perspective. And sometimes people are just buffet testing. They're just tasting from the smorgasbord of life. They're not really there to be in your life. They're there to just taste and test what you have to offer for a very short space, and then they leave. And yeah, you know, wow, life is, I don't know, you know, I think there's so many lessons, so many things that we garner into our body of experiences while we're here on earth, that we accumulate over time, things that we can take with us back to the kingdom, so that when we look back on this earth and we are helping reign and rule with Christ, that we have all of these experiences that we have learned from. One thing I do know, which is not a good thing to say, but it's actually a valuable thing to say, is that we cannot be dependent on people around us. We can't be dependent on, especially people we took for granted to be, we're going to be there all our lives, and then they turn out not to be. Life. You know, it's all thrown in the air. Whew. Okay, well, thank you so much for the letter. I hope that you enjoyed the mental process. And it was lovely. Thank you.